Okay, so let's start. Would you mind introducing yourself first?
Okay. Formally, I am Robert Cramer, although I prefer Bob Cramer. I was born in a small town in Wisconsin called Hales Corners. I came to the university here to teach in 1970. And I became what's called tenured. So nobody in their right mind would ever give that up. But in 1977, I left the university. Well, I got together with a group and we started a new bank. There hadn't been a purely new bank started since what we call the Great Depression, since the 1930s, because you had a terrible economy in the 1930s. You had World War II, all the recovery, and so people thought we were crazy to start this bank. They said you shouldn't do it. So we started the bank in 1977. I became chief financial officer, and I left the university in 1982. And I came back probably 1996 or 7. So in the meantime, we created this banking organization and called Community Banks. And then we sold that in 1987. And shortly thereafter, I started a bank in Madison, which is called First Business Bank, which still exists and is a multi-billion-dollar organization. So I probably started in my career, helped start 5 or 6 banks or financial institutions.
Okay. And would you say that there were more or fewer opportunities to build an entrepreneurial career in that period of time or nowadays?
Well, I think as far as banking is concerned, there were more opportunities back then because nobody had started a bank in so many years. And many people wanted to invest in a bank, but especially a new bank. So there were more opportunities then, even though people didn't see it. Today, there's so much more competition. I think it would be more difficult today to start a bank. I don't think a bank has been started in Wisconsin probably in the last 15 years because of all the turmoil, all the competition. So seems strange to say it was easier to do back then, but nobody saw the opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what do you think was the hardest hurdle to jump in your entrepreneurial career?
Giving up being comfortable.
Mm.
As I saw this opportunity with a few others, the bank was located just west of Madison, west of here, called the Bank of Sherwood Hills, because the hospital had just been built, a big university hospital. So there were opportunities for many people to come work there, and we thought they would need a bank. But I think the hardest hurdle is you have to overcome your comfort and be willing to take risks with no fear.
Okay, so that's an important point where to start because in class we learned that entrepreneurs do not necessarily take risks, and actually they are people who know how to control risks. So do you agree with that kind of definition, or do you think something else?
I think more in terms not of judging risk and controlling risk, but not having any fear. You're not afraid that you're going to fail. Because I borrowed a lot of money to help start this bank, and interest rates were rising. In 1982, our bank was maybe 4 or 5 years old. Interest rates hit historic highs in this country. The treasury rates were at around 15%. Today they're like at 1 or 2%.
Yeah.
So it was, but I never thought about failure. So I don't know. To me, controlling risk means that you're calculating. Like you can go to Las Vegas and you have a system for counting cards in blackjack, and you know you're going to win. You're very calculating. I don't think a true entrepreneur is all that calculating. I think they just don't have any fear.
Yeah, so that's an interesting interpretation. And
have you watched the movie about the guy that free climbed El Capitan?
No, never seen that.
This is a person that has no fear. You should look at this.
Oh.
What's it called? Like Into the Air. But if you just Google El Capitan climber, and you watch this movie, and you will see there, and they've actually tested this guy in a laboratory. He is climbing this very, very difficult sheer face of a mountain, and he has no fear he's going to fall off. I think that's a pure entrepreneur.
Yeah.
I think no fear, to me, is a more important characteristic than calculating risk.
Oh, okay, good. And another very important concept that we stressed in class is that entrepreneurship can be social, in the sense that nowadays entrepreneurs have great social concerns. Would you say that you, as an entrepreneur, have social concern or used to have social concern?
Yes, both for the banking organization we started and something I'll tell you about in a little bit called Django Bio. There were many, many small businesses in Madison that could not get loans. And they also couldn't get loans because of discrimination. And so we made loans in areas that today everybody's making loans, but back then there was quite a bit of, I'll call it discrimination. So I think that kind of characterizes it.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. And if you go back in your entrepreneurial story, how would you say that your business adapted to market innovations? So which were the biggest changes you had to go through?
Well, at the time, the banking technology was not changing it. So we didn't use some technology, we didn't discover some technology and use it. It was more the way in which we handled customers. Banking was, back then, heavily a transaction business, not really concerned about the people. So we developed a style of banking where you bank the entrepreneur personally. And you didn't look at it as a business and a person, you looked at it together. And we would bank them totally for all their needs. Then when we started what's called First Business Bank, we started a bank that said we are dedicated to businesses. But what we meant was successful people. We decided to bank successful people. And successful people are a lot more efficient to have as customers because they don't get in trouble.
Yeah.
And so a lot of cost in a banking organization is because people get in trouble and you have to work with them. there are businesses which are very high volume in terms of transactions. If you pick businesses that are successful and don't have a lot of transactions, for example, the convenience stores, like in Madison, they're what are called quick trips. They're all over the place. People come in, a lot of people spending a little bit of money. Well, all those transactions have to be processed, and there's not a lot of money in it. We, on the other hand, went after successful people and businesses that aren't that way. Maybe they're running a very successful law firm, very successful medical practice. So being very targeted in the customers that we went after. Where the typical bank back then, anybody.
Yeah, definitely.
So we were very targeted, focused.
And you are also an academic, and
right.
That's quite interesting because in class, one of the first things that we learned was that entrepreneurship can be taught, and there were some mixed feelings about that. Mm-hmm. So we compared truths and myths. What's your position on that? Would you say that entrepreneurship is a real subject, or it's something that you will learn?
That's a question that I don't know if I can really address it. I mean, certainly historically, and we have the university has a research park. The research park is filled with academics, mainly from science and medical science, who went out and started companies. And historically, the people like that didn't take a course. There weren't entrepreneurial study courses. So I think it would definitely help somebody who is going to be an entrepreneur to take a course in entrepreneurial studies. I think it would help them. I think they would probably make fewer mistakes. So I think it would be a very useful thing to study for somebody that felt later in life they might be an entrepreneur. But you don't become an entrepreneur in most cases until you're maybe in your 30s. I was probably around 32, 33 years old before I even thought about doing something a lot like this. So, I think this company called Django Bio, which I'll tell you about later, the way we started it is I was here back as just a part-time lecturer, but we went to the Wisconsin Institutes for Discovery, which is called WID, and the entrepreneurial program down the hall here has students there, and the law school has students there. So I took the main mover in this medical biotechnology company out there, and the students wrote the business plan, and the law students did the LLC, and this really gave him a leg up. So I think the other thing that entrepreneurial students can do is when they're young and studying, they can help the entrepreneurial effort. And I think that's something which goes on every day out at WID, which is very important. Now, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, they both dropped out of college and in the process started these great companies in their dorm rooms. But I would say that the entrepreneurs that I know tend to be out of school 10 to 15 years. They have accumulated some personal resources and contacts. He's talking about not only social responsibility, but a social network.
Yeah.
When you launch your company, you need investors. You need the ability to go out and attract key people. So social networking, which your generation is the masters of, a lot of controversy, but nevertheless, your ability to reach out and and get the necessary resources together to back an entrepreneurial effort, I think today is vastly improved over what it was 30, 40 years ago. I think if you have a good idea, I think it's probably a lot easier to implement because of the social networking.
Yeah. Now, since you have mentioned it, why don't you tell something more about your new venture that you are involved in?
Yes. It's easier to just sort of show it to you.
Yeah.
This is a very interesting company. And I've helped start a lot of different types of companies. And this is about as far away from financial markets as you can get. So this company, I had a neighbor, and his name is Dr. Craig Atwood, Atwood, Dr. Craig Atwood. And this is the typical entrepreneurial story on this campus. He has an appointment out at the Veterans Administration Hospital jointly with the UW Medical School. And he has spent his career researching aging. And that's a big thing right now. But what usually has happened is that when women age and they need therapy, they give them what's called estrogen. It's one of the hormones. For men, it's testosterone.
Yeah.
Well, he has long felt and done some very important research that the key, there are about 26, 27 important hormones. So what happens when we age is our hormones become imbalanced. And so you have to rebalance all the hormones. And let me see about us. Maybe this will do. Okay, so here they are. So this is Dr. Atwood. Mm-hmm. And these are some of the people who are involved in the leadership team. And I'm an investor and I'm on the board. So what this company has done is they received, the National Institute of Health gives grants traditionally for research. Mm-hmm. They started a few years ago to give grants to medical technology companies where the money was to take the research into commercial applications. And so Craig got one of these grants, which is very prestigious. So then we've gone through 2 rounds of funding, and right now they have a laboratory facility over in Fitchburg, mm-hmm. and they have a research facility actually in the Westside Research Park. Okay. And they're currently, most companies start with trials with rats or mice, mm-hmm. and they're into the rats. Mm-hmm. And the next round we're going to go after will be to the more sophisticated investors. So this will be what are called angel investors, mm-hmm. The venture capital, private equity, hedge fund, famous people. Are you familiar with Steve Aioli?
Yeah.
Okay, so he's interested in our company.
Yeah. No, good.
And these guys just went to Milwaukee to one of his concerts. And he, of course, performed in Dubai, flew to Milwaukee, did a show, and then flew to Vegas for a midnight show. All the same, it's just like... Yeah. So there are people out there that have a financial team around them because they're making so much money. And then he personally is interested in this kind of, what Django Bio would do for a person is it wouldn't extend their life, but you would avoid many of the aging diseases.
Yeah.
And people become more prone to cancer as they age. And by rebalancing the hormones, there are a number of those kind of health issues which would be addressed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
So so I have a tendency to get involved in things like this, which isn't. I'm not the primary entrepreneur. It's Dr. Atwood.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
it's kind of consistent with things I've done in the past.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So, going ahead in time a little bit, what do you think the future of entrepreneurship can be in the finance industry, especially related to the banking sector? Do you see anything happening in the future? Yeah.
Including cryptocurrencies. So, I mean, the ability to innovate in banking when you can reach, I mean, you bank with your phone. My children bank over their phone. I bank a little bit, but not as much as they do. So they totally manage their finances through the phone. And so I think the innovating through apps is a tremendous way of doing things. And I mean, like PayPal's a good example. You do not need, they did not need regulatory approval at all to do PayPal. PayPal was the first piece of cryptocurrency in the sense that you need the blockchain. So I just bought a book through PayPal. I saw that the person had a PayPal account. So PayPal knows my bank account number. They also know her bank account number. But neither of us can learn the other's bank account number. Well, PayPal is a financial innovation. Somebody did it, and it's an app. I mean, so I think the ability to innovate. Now, starting a complete financial institution up is probably not where entrepreneurism is going to go anymore. Because Facebook wanted to come out with Libra.
Yeah.
And they had MasterCard on board, Visa, a whole bunch, and they've all withdrawn.
Yeah.
Because of regulatory issues.
Yeah.
And cryptocurrencies run into a lot of regulatory issues. But look at Bitcoin. I mean, crazy. However, there are probably maybe a dozen cryptocurrencies out there. They're creating futures markets for them. So I think the ability to innovate in terms of the financial system is absolutely bursting right now.
Yeah.
But traditionally, to start a bank, you have to go to regulatory authorities and get a charter.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have an approved board of directors. You have to raise a certain amount of capital, and you have to follow 1,000,000 rules.
Yeah.
Well, I don't see anybody bothering to do that when you can innovate outside of that whole system. Mm-hmm. And so I think the opportunities for a young mind like yours to innovate in an entrepreneurial way in the payment system is incredible. I mean, you go to a restaurant, right, in Chicago. I was just in Chicago. You walk in, there are all these screens, right?
Yeah.
And then you pay with your phone.
Yeah.
So that's all payment system innovation.
Yeah,
So I think the opportunities are incredible. A lot of times what happens at the university, there'll be a finance major, and that finance major will room with an engineering student,
Yeah.
and they'll end up being entrepreneurs. There was a company that I did a little work in what's called valuation up in Wisconsin. We're about here, and then this part up along here is called the Fox River Valley.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of interesting industrial companies historically. Well, this company it was called Banner Packaging, and one of the roommates was a business school student, and the other was in chemistry. You go to a store right now, and you get a plastic bag, and you can put a bottle of wine in it. It's not going to break. The bag's not going to break. And the reason is that when they extrude that plastic out, there are very few flaws in the plastic. And the chemistry major part of this entrepreneurial effort got interested in plastics, and he said, I have a method where we can extrude plastic that won't rip.
Yeah.
So I think if you were to find somebody in engineering, electrical engineering or something like that, you could put your heads together and come up with or we got all kinds of computer science majors here.
Yeah.
Come up with a phone-driven entrepreneurial financial device or system that could be very powerful.
Yeah.
So I think the opportunities are there, but not along the traditional lines. I think it would be what we would call non-traditional.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I were younger, then I'd do it all over again.
So as a last question, what would you recommend to a student that wants to become an entrepreneur, but is a little bit scared about the unexpected, and so thinks that maybe a job in a big bank would be much safer, much more stable?
Yes. We get a lot of students that say they'd like to graduate and become a consultant, but they have no experience. So by all means, I think if a person is interested in the financial area as a way to become an entrepreneur in the future, then find the most leading edge financial institution you can find and go to work there. It happened by accident for me. I didn't want the standard training program, so I would go into an interview and I'd say, I want to go right to work for. Back then it was called the assistant to. So you would become the assistant to one of the top officers of a company, and then you'd learn that way by being their right-hand person.
Yeah.
So I went out to California, and I got a job working for a man in a bank called United California Bank. And they were coming up, at that time, the Bank of America, which of course started by Giannini, a good Italian, was one of the biggest banks in the country, and especially in California. And they wanted to put together something that would, and they had what's now Visa. It's called Bank Americard. So they had this fabulously large credit card operation, and it was the first one in the country. Well, they wanted to get all the other banks in California to band together and create a common bank credit card to compete against those. And I worked on that project. And this is what came out of it. MasterCard. So I worked on MasterCard in the late 1960s. And I mean, I didn't, but I saw what an innovative process was. That it was just incredible to be there. I mean, it was to me the best job I ever had in my life. But so yes, I think the answer is yes. I think it's difficult if you have some family money. If you have a family business that's kind of tired and run down. A friend of mine, we were on a bank board together, and his family, in a little town out west of Madison called Laval, produced very boring cheese, like provolone, Colby, cheddar, these old cheeses. And his father, after he graduated here, his father said, I think you have a lot of promise, and I think I can, over the next couple of years, get to a point where I can turn the company over to you. Well, it's called Car Valley Cheese, and it is so innovative. I mean, fascinating cheeses that are, it's like the craft beer industry. Mm-hmm. You walk into a bar in Madison and there's hundreds of little beers that are made by, little craft breweries. Mm-hmm. So he started this and yes, it was a family business, but he took an entrepreneurial leap with that company. Mm-hmm. So I think if you come from a family that has some resources and a business, then you could become an entrepreneur. But I think for most people, they would have to do what I did. They would first have to go to work in an industry and learn it. Mm-hmm. We have a big company in Madison called Epic Medical Records. A lot of people have worked at Epic, and then they have left and set up small companies to handle part of this medical records world. But where did they get their understanding and knowledge? They first went to work for Epic. Yeah. So I think that's true. I think most people, if they feel they'd like someday to own or run their own business, or to develop a business that would eventually sell to one of the big ones for $1 billion, then that's what they would do. But I think it's hard to graduate from college and be an entrepreneur. Yeah. But with a little experience, yeah.